What would you sacrifice to save a people who despise you? Could you watch the world drown from a cage? And when the water finally claims you, will you die as a woman or be reborn as something other? They called her the drowned mother, not because she died in water, but because she became something else entirely when the sea claimed her cell that night. The first tremor was a subtle thing, a deep, groaning shudder that traveled up through the cold, with stone and into the bones of the old woman chained to it. Thalassa, once the most revered hydromancer in Atlantis, now its most disgraced prophet, did not need to see to know. She felt it in the vibration that traveled up the silver manacles, a familiar thrum of discord she had tried and failed to make them understand. She opened her eyes, their cloudy gray hue almost luminous in the cell's perpetual gloom. It was beginning. Quiet, witch. A voice slurred from the corridor beyond the rusted bars. Jailer Forces limped into view, his bulky form blocking the flickering torchlight from the hall. The stench of cheap wine and old fish preceded him, a foul cloud that made the already thick air nearly unbreathable. His one good eye, bloodshot and malicious, fixed on her. The other was hidden behind a grimy leather patch. Just the earth settling. Nothing your cursed tongue can twist into more lies. Thalassa said nothing. She merely let her head fall back against the damp stone, the chill seeping through her thin, silver hair. At 89, her body was a map of her failures, a skeletal frame draped in pale, wrinkled skin, blue veins visible like rivers on a parchment of despair. The luxurious azure robes of her station were now tattered rags, the ancient symbols of water and wisdom stained with dirt and her own blood. Another tremor, stronger this time. A fine dust of mortar sifted down from the ceiling. Somewhere in the dungeon, a loose piece of metal clattered to the floor. Forces gripped the bars, his knuckles white. "Stop that," he hissed, as if she were causing it. "Your tricks won't work in here." "They are not my tricks, Forces." Thalassa's voice was a dry rustle, like reeds in a dead wind. "They are the ocean's, and it is growing impatient." He spat a wad of phlegm through the bars. It landed near her bare, filthy feet. "The high priest says you're a blight, a mad old woman who sees doom in every shadow. The queen says you spread panic, and Commander Triton." He grinned, revealing a mouth of rotten teeth. "He says you're a traitor who deserves far worse than this cell." Thalassa closed her eyes again, retreating inward. She could feel it, the immense, shifting weight of the water above and around them. The great crystalline dome that protected Atlantis from the abyssal pressure was singing its death song, a high-pitched harmonic only she could hear. She had stood before the council, before Nereus with his cold eyes and Callista with her cold heart, and had sung that song for them. She had shown them the fractures in their perfect world. They had called it sedition. The sound of lighter, hesitant footsteps approached. Young Dorian, the new guard, his face still soft with youth and unhardened by the dungeon's cruelty, peered in. His spear trembled slightly in his grip. "Jailer Forces," he said, his voice cracking, the shaking. "It's getting worse upstairs. Commander Triton has ordered." "Triton isn't down here with the sea witch, is he?" Forces snapped, turning his bloated face toward the boy. "You mind your post, whelp. Let the betters worry about the shaking." But Dorian's eyes were locked on Thalassa. There was no hatred in them, only a terrified confusion. He saw not a monster, but frail, ancient grandmother broken on the wheel of state. She met his gaze, and for a moment she saw the reflection of the city's fear in his innocent blue eyes. Then a sound unlike any before echoed through the dungeon. Not a groan, but a sharp, violent crack, as if the very spine of the world had snapped. The ground lurched violently. Dorian cried out, stumbling against the wall. Forces cursed, losing his footing and crashing to the wet floor. And then came the water. It didn't seep this time. It poured, a frantic, gushing stream from a crack that split the corridor wall, cold and black and smelling of the deep ocean. It swirled around Forces as he scrambled to get up, pulling at his legs. "This is your doing," he screamed, his voice shrill with panic. But Thalassa wasn't looking at him. The water was rising fast, already ankle-deep and chilling her to the bone. Yet, the cold was not the shock she expected. It felt familiar, an old friend she had long forgotten. As it swirled around her thin ankles, she felt a tremor that was not of the earth, but of something awakening within her. A power they had tried to chain, to beat out of her, now stirring in its slumber, called forth by the very element that was meant to be her executioner. The silver manacles on her wrists, designed to suppress her magic, began to feel warm against her skin. The ocean was not her doom. It was her answer. And as the water rose to her knees, Thalassa, the drowned mother, allowed herself a small, secret smile in the darkness. High above the drowning dungeon, in the opalescent heart of the Atlantean palace, the ruling council danced on the edge of a volcano and called it a celebration. The air, thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and spiced wine, trembled with the forced laughter of the elite. They chose not to hear the dissonant groans from the deep, the desperate warnings sung by the city's very foundations. In the grand solarium, a chamber walled with curved crystal that offered a breathtaking, arrogant view of the city spires and the protective dome beyond, Queen Callista raised a goblet of liquid gold. "To the unbroken peace of Atlantis," she declared, her voice a silken blade. "May the tremors of dissent always be so easily silenced." High Priest Nereus stood beside her, his bald head reflecting the chamber's glow, the golden serpents tattooed across his scalp seeming to writhe in the shifting light. He did not drink. His cold, black eyes were fixed not on the queen, but on the dome above, watching, waiting. "The prophetess Thalassa spoke of cracks," he said, his voice low so only she and the hulking Commander Triton could hear. She described a sound like breaking glass. Commander Triton grunted, his massive hand tightening around his own goblet, denting the metal. "The mad ramblings of a traitor. The dome has held for 1,000 years. It will hold for 1,000 more. Her warnings were a poison, and we have cut out the infection." He glanced towards the dungeon levels far below, a cruel satisfaction in his single good eye. "The people are restless, Nereus," Callista murmured, her emerald eyes scanning the nervous crowd of courtiers. Lady Amphitrite fanned herself with exaggerated distress, her dyed red hair a violent contrast to the ashen fear on her face. Senator Proteus watched from a shadowed corner, his beady eyes calculating, already measuring the shifting currents of power. "The people are sheep," Triton retorted. "They need a firm hand, not the frightened whispers of an old woman." As if in direct defiance of his words, the world screamed. It was not a groan this time, but a shriek of tortured crystal that tore through the very air. The dome above them, the magnificent crystalline heaven that was the source of Atlantean pride and power, fractured. A single, jagged line of black lightning forked across its vast surface, and through the crack, the true, terrifying face of the deep ocean stared in at them, a wall of absolute, crushing blackness. For a heartbeat, there was a silence more deafening than the scream. Then chaos. The curved crystal wall of the solarium exploded inwards. It was not a shower of shards, but a tsunami, a solid fist of water, cold as death and with the weight of the abyss behind it, smashed into the room. It plucked courtiers from their feet, silenced their screams in a torrent of bubbles, and shattered marble columns as if they were twigs. Queen Callista was thrown from her dais, her crown of sea glass and diamonds torn from her head. She flailed, regal composure replaced by primal terror, her purple silks becoming a shroud in the churning water. Nereus raised his golden trident staff, his lips moving in a frantic prayer, a shimmering barrier of light flickering around him for a mere second before the ocean's immense power snuffed it out. The staff was torn from his grasp, spinning away into the murk. Commander Triton roared, a battle cry against an enemy he could not stab or cleave. He planted his feet, muscles straining, trying to hold back the inevitable. The water took him anyway, lifting his armored bulk and dashing him against the gilded throne. The impact a dull, final crunch of metal and bone. Below, her cell, Thalassa felt it all. The final, catastrophic failure of the dome was a symphony to her heightened senses. She felt the death cries of the city above as sharp, painful pinpricks against her soul. But the water rising around her was no longer just water. It was an extension of her will, her grief, her rage. The silver manacles on her wrists glowed red-hot, then white, then shattered. The magic-suppressing metal could not contain the power now flooding into her from the awakened ocean. Her cloudy gray eyes snapped open, and they were cloudy no more. They burned with a cold, blue phosphorescence, seeing not the physical confines of her cell, but the swirling currents of magic and life force in the dying city. The water was at her chest now, yet she felt no urge to breathe. Her long, silver hair floated around her head like a halo of seaweed, alive with a current of its own. Her frail body, once a prison of bone and ache, felt strong. The very water seemed to be knitting her together, infusing her with a terrible, ancient vitality. Jailer Forces was a frantic animal, clawing at the ceiling of the corridor, his mouth gasping for the last pockets of air. "Help me. Which, please?" he gurgled, his one eye wide with the fear he had so often inflicted on others. Thalassa turned her luminous gaze upon him. She did not speak, but the water did. It answered the malice in his heart, coiling around him like a serpent, pulling him down, filling his lungs with the salt of the ocean he had never respected. Young Dorian was trapped, his leg pinned by a collapsed stone archway. He watched the transformed Thalassa with pure awe, his fear momentarily eclipsed by the sight of her resurrection. She gestured a slow, graceful movement of her hand, and the water obeyed, gently shifting the heavy stone just enough for him to pull free. "Go," a voice echoed in his mind, not a sound, but a thought impressed upon him by the water itself. "To the surface. Speak of this." As Dorian scrambled towards a rising air pocket and a distant, hopeful shaft of light, Thalassa, the drowned mother, rose from the submerged ruins of her prison. The stones of the dungeon fell away from her as if repelled. She was no longer in the ocean. She was the ocean, and she ascended, not to save the city that had spurned her, but to claim it. The opulent halls of the palace were a graveyard frozen in a moment of terror. The drowned, their faces locked in final masks of surprise and agony, floated amidst the debris of their vanity. Thalassa moved through them, a specter of retribution, the water parting before her and closing in her wake. She felt the lingering echoes of their final thoughts, the greed, the fear, the regret. She found Queen Callista entangled in the velvet drapes of her own chambers, still struggling, a bubble of precious air escaping her lips. Their eyes met. The queen's emerald gaze, once so full of cold command, was now just a plea. Thalassa felt no vengeance, only a profound, sorrowful inevitability. She watched as the last of the queen's breath escaped in a silvery trail, and the light in those beautiful eyes was extinguished by the dark water. This was not a victory. It was a reckoning. And as Thalassa moved towards the heart of her new, sunken domain, she knew her transformation was only beginning. The leviathan of the deep had made her an offer, and she had accepted. The city of air was dead. Long live silence, not the empty silence of a quiet room, but the profound, crushing silence of the abyss. The chaotic roar of the collapsing city faded into a muffled, distant memory, replaced by a weighty stillness that pressed in on all sides. Thalassa floated, suspended in the heart of the drowned palace. The frantic need for air was a forgotten instinct, a ghost of her mortal life. Now, she breathed the water itself, drawing its cold vitality into lungs that had been remade. Her body was no longer a cage of brittle bones and aching joints. It was a vessel of power, thrumming with the energy of the deep. Her tattered robe swirled around her like the mantle of a queen, and her hair, a living silver cloud, pulsed with a soft, internal luminescence, casting a ghostly light on the tragic tableaus around her. She was the heart of this new, silent world. It was in this cathedral of death that they found her. They came not with a rush of water, but as a part of it, materializing from the gloom like three beautiful, terrible dreams. The Siren sisters. They were identical, their upper bodies pale and flawless, with skin the color of moonlight on a shallow reef. Their hair was a flowing, living white, moving with a current all its own. Below the waist, their bodies tapered into powerful, scale tails that shimmered with iridescent colors. But their beauty was a mask. Their eyes were solid black, windows into an ancient, alien void, and when they smiled, their lips parted to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. They did not speak with sound. Their voices, harmonized and chillingly beautiful, wove directly into her mind. You are the listener. The first thought voice came, smooth as polished shell, the one who heard the song of the deep when others plugged their ears. You are the betrayed. The second voice echoed, a whisper of cold currents, cast down by the children of air for speaking the truth of the water. And now, the third voice concluded, its tone holding a final, inevitable weight. You are the empty vessel, the drowned mother. What will you fill yourself with? The bitterness of your end, or the purpose of our beginning? Thalassa regarded them, her own glowing blue eyes unblinking. She felt no fear, only a vast and weary curiosity. Who are you to offer purpose? She thought back, the water carrying her will as clearly as speech. We are the heralds, they replied in unison, their triple voice a chord that vibrated in her bones. We speak for he who slumbers in the trench. We speak for Oceanus. The name resonated through the water, a low-frequency hum that shook the very foundations of the sunken city. It was a name of power, of age, of a consciousness so vast it made the fall of Atlantis seem like the bursting of a single bubble. He has watched, the sirens continued, circling her slowly. He saw your suffering. He heard the city's hubris ringing through the deep, an offense to the balance. Its fall was necessary. But you are an unexpected current, a piece that does not fit. An image flooded Thalassa's mind, not a memory, but a vision. She saw herself not as she was, but as she could be. Not a frail ghost haunting the ruins, but a titan of the deep. Her form was larger, woven from water and shadow, crowned with the phosphorescent life of the trench. She sat not on a throne of gold, but on a dais of crystalline coral, ruling over the creatures of the abyss, a guardian of the silent, dark world. The power in the vision was intoxicating, a balm to a lifetime of powerlessness. The offer is this, the sirens whispered, their song now intimate, seductive. Fate, let your spirit dissolve into the currents, a final, bitter sigh of the woman who failed. They paused, letting the desolation of that choice sink in, or their voices swelled, filled with the pressure of the deepest ocean ascend. Become the warden of this sunken realm, the heart of the new silence, the drowned mother in truth. Rule not as a mortal queen of air, but as an eternal goddess of the deep. Oceanus offers you this mantle. He offers you a place in the new order. Thalassa looked around her. She saw the floating body of a courtier, a young man who had once thrown rotten fruit at her during her trial. She saw the glittering, useless crown of Queen Callista, half buried in the silt. She saw the entire, beautiful, arrogant city, now a monument to its own folly. To fade was to let them win, to let their short-sightedness be the final word on her life. But to ascend, that was not about vengeance. It was about transformation. It was about taking the very thing that had destroyed her old life and letting it become the foundation of a new one. The ocean had been her only true ally. Now it offered her a kingdom. She thought of young Dorian, his innocent face. She had shown him mercy. That part of her, the part that could still feel compassion, was not gone. Perhaps it could be part of this new existence. A different kind of rule. Not of fear, like Nereus, but of a solemn, terrible balance. She turned her gaze back to the waiting sirens. The blue light in her eyes intensified, burning with a cold, decisive fire. I will not fade. Her thought rang out, clear and strong. A pebble dropped into the silent sea. I will ascend. The siren sisters smiled their sharp, predatory smiles. As one, they bowed their heads. Then it is done, their harmonized voice echoed. The pact is sealed. Welcome, Mother. And as the words faded from her mind, the true transformation began. The water around her thickened, swirling with dark energy. She felt her form expanding, her consciousness stretching out, touching the farthest, darkest corners of the sunken city. She could feel every drifting body, every fallen stone, every creature that now dared to venture into the ruins. It was all hers. The woman Thalassa was gone. The drowned mother had awakened. The power did not simply fill her, it rewrote her. It was a symphony of change conducted in the crushing silence of the abyss. Thalassa's mortal form, already altered, now unraveled and was woven anew by the ancient, cold hands of the deep. Her skeletal frame stretched, not with the ache of age, but with the terrifying grace of a deep-sea leviathan. Her skin, once pale and translucent, hardened into a mosaic of living mother-of-pearl and abyssal shale, capable of withstanding pressures that would crush steel. Her long silver hair, now teeming with bioluminescent algae, became a drifting net of faint light in the perpetual darkness, each strand a censer that tasted the water, reading the currents and the whispers they carried. Her eyes, burning with blue phosphorescence, now saw not just the physical ruins, but the ghostly echoes of the past. She saw the shimmering afterimages of the panicked crowds, heard the muffled echoes of their final screams, trapped in the water like flies in amber. The grandeur of the palace was now a sarcophagus, and she was its immortal custodian. This was her domain. Every toppled spire, every sediment-filled hall, every bone resting on the silt was under her warden's gaze. And her first subjects were arriving. They came from the trench, creatures of nightmare and wonder that had dwelled in the lightless plains below Atlantis. Sleek, eel-like forms with jaws that unhinged, their bodies patterned with lights that pulsed in complex, hypnotic rhythms. Crabs the size of chariots, their claws capable of snipping marble pillars, scuttled through the grand boulevards. And the Siren sisters were always near, her silent heralds, their black eyes observing, their songless voices a constant, soothing hum in the back of her mind. "They are yours to command, Mother," their chorus whispered. "The children of the abyss acknowledge your reign." Her first test came not from the outside, but from within the ruins. A group of survivors, a handful of palace guards and a few nobles, who had found refuge in a magically reinforced treasure vault, had managed to create an air bubble. Led by the cruel, ambitious guard captain Glaucus, they were planning a desperate ascent. Thalassa felt their presence like a pustule on her new skin. Their frantic, air-breathing hearts were a discordant rhythm in her tranquil, liquid world. She found them in the vault, a scene of pathetic hubris. Glaucus, his handsome face gaunt with fear and determination, was directing his men to pile treasure into sacks, useless gold and gems that would only drag them to their deaths. "We can make it," Glaucus barked, his voice strained in the thin, stale air. "The witch is dead. The sea is calm now. We just have to reach the surface world." Thalassa willed the water at the vault's entrance to part. She did not enter fully, but allowed her new form to be silhouetted in the archway, her hair a corona of ethereal light, her eyes two blue suns in the gloom. Glaucus froze, a golden chalice falling from his nerveless fingers. It clattered on the marble floor, the sound absurdly loud. The other men fell to their knees, whimpering. They saw a demon, a monster risen from their worst nightmares. "You," Glaucus stammered, drawing his sword. The blade, once gleaming, was now tarnished and pitiful. "Stay back, Spectre." Thalassa did not speak. She simply extended a hand, her fingers long and elegant, woven of water and shadow. The sacks of treasure at Glaucus's feet burst open, and the gold coins, necklaces, and gemstones did not fall. They rose, suspended in the water, now flooding back into the chamber. They swirled around the terrified men, a beautiful, deadly maelstrom of their own greed. "There's no surface for you." Her voice echoed in their minds, calm and absolute. "Your world of air is a forgotten dream. This is the only world that remains." She watched their air bubble shrink, the water reclaiming its territory. She felt no pleasure in their terror, only a solemn sense of duty. They were a disruption, a relic of a failed age. They had to be reconciled. Glaucus, in a final act of defiance, lunged at her with his sword. The blade passed through her watery form as if through mist. She looked at him, her head tilted with a touch of divine pity, and then willed the water around him to solidify. It pressed in on him, not with a violent crash, but with the inexorable, gentle pressure of the deep. His eyes bulged, his sword dropped, and he was drawn down into the darkness of the vault, embraced by the ocean he had never understood. The other men ceased their struggle, accepting their fate. Their terror faded into a strange, peaceful resignation. They were now part of the city's story, a story she now curated. This was her purpose, not merely to exist, but to rule, to maintain the silence, to enforce the balance. The offer of Oceanus had not been one of mere survival, but of sovereignty. She was the warden, the guardian, the mother of this sunken necropolis. As she turned from the silent vault, a new sensation tugged at the edges of her consciousness, a familiar, warm, and painfully mortal spark of life. It was faint, flickering, hiding in the ruins of the old temple district. Lysandra, a ripple of something that was not quite emotion, but a profound recognition, passed through her. The past was not yet done with the drowned mother. The spark of Lysandra's life was a candle flame guttering in the vast, dark cathedral of the drowned city. To Thalassa's new senses, attuned to the cold pulse of the abyss and the slow, geological patience of the deep, it was an anomaly, a warm, fragile, and achingly familiar memory made flesh. It pulled at a ghost within her, the remnant of the woman who had loved, taught, and been betrayed. She moved through the water, a silent leviathan gliding past the grand, collapsed structures of the temple district. Here, the statues of the old, forgotten sea gods lay broken, their stone eyes blind to the true divinity that now passed among them. The warm spark led her to the Temple of Tides, its once magnificent coral arches now home to drifting, pale anemones and schools of silver fish that scattered at her approach. Inside, in the high altar room, a miracle of architecture and desperation had occurred. A massive, inverted crystal bowl, a ceremonial focus for lunar magic, had trapped a large pocket of air as the temple flooded. Huddled within this last fragile bubble of the world that was Lysandra. She was curled on the altar steps, her healer's robes stained and torn. Her face, once soft and kind, was etched with exhaustion and grief. She was tending to a young girl, maybe 6 or 7, who was shivering, her breathing shallow. The air in the bubble was stale, thick with the scent of salt and fear. Thalassa paused at the threshold where water met air. She did not part the waters this time. She simply watched, a spectral queen observing a diorama from a lost age. She saw the gentle way Lysandra brushed the hair from the child's forehead, the hopeless determination in her eyes. This was the woman who had stood by her when all others turned away, the one who had pleaded with the council for reason, her voice trembling but unwavering. She had been punished for that loyalty, demoted and shunned. Lysandra felt the presence before she saw it. The temperature in the air pocket dropped sharply. The faint blue light from the doorway cast long, dancing shadows. She looked up slowly, her breath catching in her throat. The creature in the doorway was both terrifying and majestic, a being of water and shadow, crowned with living light, with eyes that held the cold fire of the ocean's heart. It was a goddess of the deep, a monster from legend, and yet, in the set of its brow and the subtle, sorrowful tilt of its head, Lysandra saw a ghost. Thalassa. The name was a whisper, a fragile thing that barely disturbed the heavy air. "Master, is it you?" The drowned mother did not speak with a mind voice that boomed with power. This time, when her words formed in Lysandra's mind, they were soft, like a current stirring sea grass. The woman called Thalassa is a memory the water keeps. I am what remains. Tears welled in Lysandra's eyes, not of fear, but of a profound, heartbreaking understanding. They said you were a traitor. They said the sea would be your tomb. She gave a wet, choked laugh. They were such fools. They feared what they could not control, the thought voice replied, its tone holding a vast, oceanic sadness. They are at peace now. Their noise is ended. The little girl on the steps stirred, moaning in her feverish sleep. Lysandra's gaze flickered down to her, then back to the luminous being in the doorway. Her name is Alara. Her parents, they didn't make it. I couldn't save them. I can't even save her. The confession was a sob. This air, it's turning foul. We are dying here slowly. Thalassa observed the child. She could feel the weakness of her life force, the infection raging in her small lungs, a sickness of air, a problem her new world was not designed to solve. The part of her that was still, inextricably, Thalassa, ached. This was a remnant of her failure, a final, innocent casualty of the pride she had failed to stop. She could let the bubble collapse. It would be a swift end, a mercy, perhaps, compared to slow suffocation. It was the logical choice, the choice of a warden tidying her domain. It was what Oceanus would expect. But the ghost in the machine rebelled. The child cannot breathe the water. Thalassa's voice echoed in Lysandra's mind. Not yet. Her body is not ready. But the world of air is gone. What do we do? Lysandra pleaded, her voice raw with despair. There is no place for us. Thalassa was silent for a long moment, her glowing eyes fixed on the sick child. She was the ruler of the deep, bound by a pact to a leviathan. But before that, she had been a teacher, a healer, a mother to no one, but a guardian to all who sought knowledge. That core, that essential self, had not been drowned. It had been refined, pressurized into something stronger. She made a decision, not as the drowned mother, but as Thalassa. She raised a hand. Outside the bubble, the water began to swirl, not violently, but with purpose. Fronds of rare, deep-sea kelp, glowing with soft green bioluminescence, were drawn toward her. A particular type of clam, its shell etched with natural runes, was gently pried from a nearby wall. She was gathering, compounding, using the very essence of her new kingdom to craft a solution from the old one. There's a place. Her thought voice finally came resolute. Not in the world of air, nor in the heart of the deep, but in the space between. A place I can make. She was going to break the rules of her new existence. She was going to use the power of the abyss not to enforce silence, but to preserve a single, fragile song. The Siren sisters would disapprove. Oceanus might sense the imbalance, but as she looked at Lysandra's face, seeing the rekindling of a hope she thought extinguished, Thalassa knew she had no other choice. The drowned mother had a heart, and it was still capable of mercy. The journey from the temple was a funeral procession for a dying world. Thalassa, the drowned mother, cradled the unconscious child, Alara, in a cocoon of gently swirling, warmed water. Lysandra floated beside her, encased in a separate, shimmering bubble of air that Thalassa maintained with a fraction of her will. They moved through the grand, corpse-filled avenues, past the vacant stairs of marble statues and the empty sockets of drowned royalty. Lysandra wept silently, her tears becoming tiny, lost pearls in the salt water. Thalassa felt the weight of the Siren's gaze upon her, a cold pressure from the surrounding darkness. They did not interfere, but their silent disapproval was a tangible current in the water. She was diverting her power, her focus, for a sentimental attachment to the past. She was creating an anomaly in her perfect, silent domain, but the ghost of the woman she had been was stubborn. She led them away from the city's heart, towards the jagged, volcanic cliffs that had once formed its natural foundation. Here, the architecture of Atlantis gave way to the raw architecture of the earth. She stopped before a fissure, a dark, unassuming crack in the rock face, from which drifted a faint, thermal warmth. This is the place. Her voice echoed in Lysandra's mind. She gestured, and the rock itself obeyed, the fissure widening silently into a smooth, arched passageway. They entered a cavern that took Lysandra's breath away. It was not large, but it was breathtaking. The ceiling was a mosaic of naturally phosphorescent crystals, casting a soft, blue-white light that mimicked the moon. In the center, a pool of fresh, clean water, filtered through porous volcanic rock, bubbled gently, fed by a geothermal spring. Most miraculously, a large pocket of air, sweet and breathable, filled the upper half of the cavern, sustained by some unknown vent to a world above that was now impossibly far away. It was a sanctuary, a bubble within a bubble, a memory of the surface, preserved in the heart of the deep. Thalassa gently laid Alara on a smooth, flat stone beside the freshwater pool. The bioluminescent kelp and the powdered rune clam shell she had gathered earlier now floated in the air before her, coalescing into a soft, pulsing orb of green-gold light. "The sickness is in her lungs," Thalassa explained. "It is a sickness of stale, dying air. This will cleanse it." She guided the orb of light until it hovered just over the child's chest. Then she let it sink, not through her skin, but into it. Alara's small body glowed from within for a moment, and she took a sudden, deep, rattling breath. The feverish flush on her cheeks began to recede, replaced by the healthy color of sleep. Her breathing eased into a steady, peaceful rhythm. Lysandra sobbed with relief, her hands flying to her mouth. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking as she looked at the transformed being before her. "Oh, Thalassa, thank you." "Do not thank me," the reply came, and the thought voice was heavy with a new kind of sorrow. "I have saved her life only to imprison her. This grotto is her world now. Yours too. You can never leave." Lysandra looked around the beautiful, terrible prison, the crystal stars on the ceiling, the gentle pool, the walls of unyielding stone. It was a gilded cage, a paradise carved from despair. She understood. To step outside was to drown, or to face the other, less merciful denizens of the deep. "I understand," Lysandra said, her voice steadying. She walked to the pool, cupping her hands and drinking the fresh water. "We will live here. We will remember." Thalassa regarded her former student, this brave, kind woman who had chosen to share a child's life sentence. The part of her that was the drowned mother saw the inherent instability of this arrangement, a pocket of the past, festering in her perfect present. But the part that was Thalassa saw something else, a thread of continuity, a legacy. "I will ensure you have food," Thalassa said. "Plants that will grow in the crystal light. Fish from the freshwater spring. You will want for nothing but the sky." "And you?" Lysandra asked, her eyes searching the luminous, alien features. "Will you visit us?" Thalassa was silent for a long time, the only sound the gentle plink of water dripping from the cavern's ceiling into the pool. "I am the warden of the deep," she replied, her tone final, yet not unkind. "My domain is the silence. My duty is the balance. This," she gestured to the grotto, "this is a compromise I should not have made, a flaw in the design, a ghost I cannot exorcise." She turned to leave, her form beginning to dissolve back into the water at the entrance. "But I am, it seems, still made of ghosts. I will return." And with that, she was gone, the rock ceiling behind her as if it had never opened. Lysandra was left alone in the stunning silence, the only sounds Alara's peaceful breathing and the soft, mocking drip of water. She had been saved, granted a miracle, but as she looked at the sleeping child, she knew they were the last flicker of extinguished candle, living on in a world of eternal night, forever under the watchful, sorrowful gaze of the drowned mother. The silence of the abyss was no longer pure. The creation of the grotto had sent a ripple through the fabric of Thalassa's new realm, a subtle dissonance in the harmonious hum of the deep. As she returned to the vast, liquid cathedral of the sunken city, she felt the weight of Oceanus's attention settle upon her, a pressure more immense and ancient than any she had yet known. It was not a gaze of anger, but of assessment, a master checking on a tool that had developed a will of its own. The water around her grew colder, denser. The faint, ambient light from the city's phosphorescent life faded, plunging her into an absolute blackness that was both a void and a presence. This was not the darkness of an empty room. It was the darkness of a conscious mind, vast and unknowable. Then a voice. It did not form words in her mind like the Siren's song. It was a direct impression of meaning, a tectonic shift in understanding that rearranged her thoughts. It was the voice of the trench itself. "You have preserved a fragment of the disease." The thought was not an accusation, but a statement of fact, heavy with the patience of millennia. Thalassa felt her own consciousness shrink before its scale. She was a mayfly in the presence of a mountain. "It is not a disease," she responded, her thought voice a fragile spark in the overwhelming dark. "It is compassion, a debt of honor from the life I left behind. Compassion is a luxury of mortals who dwell in the brief sun." Honor is a chain forged in the realm of air. You have shed these skins. Why cling to their scent? An image flooded her being. The grotto, not as a sanctuary, but as a festering wound. She saw the air as a corrosive gas, the very memories Lysandra and the child cherished as a psychic poison that would slowly seep into her domain, weakening its resolve, reminding it of a softer, weaker way of existence. It was a cancer of sentiment in the perfect, cold organism of the deep. They are harmless, Thalassa insisted, though a sliver of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced her certainty. They are contained. They affect nothing. A single grain of sand shifts the slope of the continent. A single mercy breeds 1,000 claimants. You are the warden, not the caretaker of ghosts. The balance demands absolutism. The pressure intensified, not to crush her, but to educate. She felt the sheer, brutal logic of the leviathan's worldview. In the endless, grinding patience of geological time, sentiment was noise. Attachment was a flaw. The fall of Atlantis was not a tragedy. It was a necessary pruning, the removal of a loud, chaotic branch so the rest of the tree could thrive in silent, dark harmony. Her role was to be the guardian of that silence. The offer was for a queen, a goddess, not a nursemaid. You must choose the ghosts of the old world or the throne of the new. You cannot hold both. The choice was laid bare before her, stark and terrible. To be the perfect, absolute warden of the deep, she would have to let the grotto collapse, to allow the last pocket of air to be extinguished, the last warm heart to be stilled. It would be the final, definitive act of drowning Thalassa, the woman, and cementing the reign of the drowned mother. The image of Lysandra's grateful, heartbroken face flashed in her mind, the feel of Alara's small, feverish body in her arms. These were not just ghosts. They were the last embers of the fire that had once warmed her mortal soul. To snuff them out would be to become as cold and unfeeling as the stone around her. Yet, the logic of Oceanus was inescapable. She could feel the truth of it in the water, in the ancient, perfect order of the abyss. Her compromise was a weakness, a point of entry for chaos. I understand, she finally responded, the thought heavy with a sorrow as deep as the trench itself. The immense pressure receded. The absolute blackness lightened back to the familiar gloom of the sunken city. The tide does not negotiate. It simply is. Become the tide. The Leviathan's presence faded, leaving her alone with the weight of her sovereignty. The Siren sisters materialized from the shadows, their black eyes watching her, waiting. They had heard the exchange. They knew the ultimatum. Thalassa, the drowned mother, turned her luminous gaze towards the distant, hidden fissure that led to the grotto. The throne of the new world was a seat of absolute, lonely power. The ghosts of the old world were a chain of love and memory. The ocean, her new master, demanded a choice. And for the first time since her transformation, she felt truly, utterly torn. The path of the queen was clear, but the heart of the woman, though drowned, was not yet still. The silence in the throne room was a living entity. Thalassa floated at its center, in the great hall where Queen Callista had once held court. The gilded throne was now a scaffold for strange, glowing corals and swaying anemones. The Siren sisters formed a silent, unmoving triangle around her, their black eyes reflecting her inner turmoil. They were her counsel now, and they awaited the verdict of their queen. The Leviathan's ultimatum echoed in the hollows of her being. The ghosts of the old world, or the throne of the new. It was a demand for ideological purity, a final test of her commitment to the absolute, unsentimental order of the deep. She extended her consciousness, a vast net cast over her sunken kingdom. She felt the slow, patient grazing of the great crabs in the plaza, the sinuous dance of the eels through the palace spires, the solemn stillness of the thousands of drowned who were now part of the landscape. It was a perfect, self-contained ecosystem of silence, a masterpiece of death and renewal. Then, like a single, stubborn, warm heartbeat, she felt the grotto. She saw Lysandra, humming an old Atlantean lullaby as she wove fronds of glowing kelp into a blanket for Alara. She saw the child, her health restored, chasing the luminescent fish in the freshwater pool, her laughter a silent, joyous vibration in the water that only Thalassa could perceive. They were not a fragment of the disease. They were a seed, a tiny, fragile seed of what Atlantis could have been, not a city of arrogant power, but one of compassion, of community, of love. Everything Nereus and Callista had crushed in their climb to the top. The Siren sisters stirred. Their harmonized voice, when it came, was devoid of judgment, merely a reflection of the leviathan's will. The anomaly weakens the structure. Mother, they whispered into her mind. It introduces variables. It remembers a world that must be forgotten. To rule is to make hard choices for the whole. The part must sometimes be sacrificed for the perfection of the totality. They were right. By the cold, brutal calculus of power, the grotto was a flaw. Letting it stand was a risk, a sign of weakness that the ancient, unforgiving denizens of the deep might one day exploit. But Thalassa was not Oceanus. She was not an ancient leviathan born of the primordial dark. She was a transformed woman, and the woman, the teacher, the healer, knew a different truth. True strength was not the absence of vulnerability, but the capacity to protect it. A kingdom built on the sacrifice of the innocent was no different from the hubris of old Atlantis. It was just a different kind of tyranny. She had accepted the power of the deep to become more than what she was, not less. To drown her compassion would be to become less. It would be to lose the very thing that made her choice different from the councils. They had chosen power over people. She would not make the same mistake. A new resolve, cold and clear and sharp as an icicle, formed within her. She would not be a queen who ruled through absolute power. She would be a mother who ruled through absolute sovereignty. And a mother protects her children, all of them, even the strange, warm, air-breathing ones. Her luminous eyes opened, burning with a decisive blue fire. She looked at each of the Siren sisters in turn. I have made my choice. Her thought voice rang out, not in defiance, but in declaration. I will not sacrifice them. The grotto remains. The water in the throne room grew instantly colder. The Sirens did not move, but their disapproval was a frost on the water. Oceanus will not be pleased, they chimed. Oceanus rules the trench, Thalassa replied, her will firming, drawing upon the immense power he had given her. I rule the sunken city, and my rule will not be built on the bones of children. If that is a flaw in his design, then so be it. He may have offered me this throne, but I will sit upon it as I see fit. She rose from her place, her form seeming to grow, to fill the vast chamber. The water around her crackled with contained energy. This is my covenant. I will be the warden of the deep. I will enforce the silence and maintain the balance. But I will also be the drowned mother. And a mother's first duty is to protect life, in all its fragile, imperfect forms. They are under my protection. That is not a weakness. It is the source of my strength. The Siren sisters bowed their heads, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. The message would be carried to the trench. A new order was being defined, not by the ancient Leviathan, but by the will of the woman who had become a goddess. Thalassa turned her back on them and swam towards the entrance of the throne room. She had a grotto to visit. She had a legacy to nurture. The path ahead would be difficult. Oceanus might challenge her. Other ancient powers of the deep might test this new, softer warden. But as she moved through her silent, beautiful, dead kingdom, she felt the warm, persistent spark of the grotto calling to her. It was no longer a dissonance. It was a melody, a single brave, beautiful melody in the great silence, and she would be its shield. The drowned mother had chosen, and in choosing, had become truly holy herself. The grotto was exactly as she had left it, a pocket of impossible life. Thalassa was sleeping, curled under the blanket of glowing kelp, her small chest rising and falling in a rhythm that was a quiet drum in Thalassa's perception. Lysandra was tending to a patch of luminous fungi, her movements calm, resigned to her beautiful prison. When Thalassa materialized from the rock wall, neither of them flinched. The child, in her innocence, had already accepted the luminous goddess as part of her world. Lysandra simply looked up, her eyes holding a question she was almost afraid to ask. You are safe. Thalassa's thought voice filled the cavern, softer than before, carrying a new and unshakable certainty. This place is under my protection. It will not fall. It will not be taken. This is my first edict. Lysandra released a breath she seemed to have been holding for days. The tension in her shoulders melted away, replaced by a profound, weary gratitude. What does that mean? She whispered. It means the rules of this world have changed, Thalassa replied. She extended a hand, and the water of the freshwater pool shimmered. From its depths, a school of small, silver fish with fins like spun glass emerged, swimming in a complex, playful dance before settling into the pool. The deep will provide for you. It will not harm you. You are not prisoners here. You are seeds. She turned her glowing gaze to the sleeping Alara. She will never know the world of air, but she will know this one. She will learn its songs, its secrets. She will be a child of two worlds, belonging entirely to neither, but protected by both. As she spoke the words, she felt the rightness of them resonate through her being. This was not a compromise, it was an evolution. Her domain was not just a graveyard to be policed, but a living ecosystem that could, in this one small, miraculous way, include the world that was lost. It was a more complex balance, a more difficult harmony to maintain, but it was a truer one. Leaving the grotto, she felt the weight of the leviathan's gaze once more, but this time it was distant, observing. There was no renewed pressure, no tectonic anger, only a vast, silent assessment. She had asserted her sovereignty. She had drawn a line in the sand at the bottom of the sea. The message was clear. The Drowned Mother would rule with compassion as well as strength, or she would not rule at all. She ascended to the highest remaining spire of the palace, a needle of obsidian that pierced the dark water. Below her, the city lay in its eternal rest, beautiful and terrible. But now, she did not see just silence and death. She saw a new order. The great crabs were not just scavengers. They were gardeners, trimming the strange new corals that grew on the statues. The eels were not just predators. They were sentinels, patrolling the borders. And in a hidden grotto, a woman and a child were a library of the old world, a repository of its memories and its music. She was no longer just a warden. She was a curator, a guardian of endings, and, impossibly, a midwife to a new beginning. From her perch, she issued a silent command that rippled through the water, a vibration felt by every creature in her domain. It was not a threat, nor a demand. It was a declaration of identity. I am Thalassa, the Drowned Mother. This city is my body. Its silence is my voice. Its depths are my mercy, and its pressures are my law. The old world is gone. The new world is born. And in its heart, a single, warm light will be allowed to shine. The water itself seemed to still, accepting her decree. The Siren sisters, floating at the base of the spire, looked up at her. For the first time, their harmonized voices held a note that was not cold instruction, but something resembling respect. It will be as you will, Mother. The Drowned Mother looked out over her kingdom, a realm of shadows and light, of death and life, of absolute power and deliberate mercy. The path was set. The ghost and the goddess were reconciled. Atlantis was gone, but from its ruins, something stranger and more beautiful had risen, and she, Thalassa, would be its heart for all eternity. Time in the world of air was a river, a linear, rushing thing, but in the sunken kingdom, time was a deep, slow current, circling back on itself. Seasons were marked not by the sun, but by the slow migration of luminous jellyfish, or the gradual growth of a coral beard on the face of a stone king. Years became decades, and decades bled into centuries. The Drowned Mother's reign was absolute, but it was not one of tyranny. It was a sovereignty of profound, watchful stillness. She was the consciousness of the deep, the will behind the pressure. The great leviathan, Oceanus, never acknowledged her choice, but neither did it challenge her. A new balance had been struck, an understanding between two ancient powers, one of the primordial abyss and one of a transformed world. Her kingdom thrived in its silent way. The strange, bioluminescent flora she had cultivated spread, painting the dead city in ethereal shades of blue, green, and violet. The skeletons of the old Atlanteans were now intricate sculptures, adorned with slow-growing, jewel-toned anemones and inhabited by shy, translucent shrimp. It was not a tomb, but a memorial garden of breathtaking, melancholic beauty. And in the hidden grotto, life persisted. Thalassa grew. The frail child became a young woman with hair the color of dark seaweed and eyes that held the light of the glowing crystals above. She never knew the feel of wind, but she knew the caress of warm water from the spring. She never saw the sun, but she learned the names of 100 different kinds of phosphorescent moss. Lysandra taught her the old stories of Atlantis and its pride, of the prophetess Thalassa of the fall. But they were just stories, tales of a distant, almost mythical past. To Thalassa, Thalassa was not a tragic heroine. She was simply the mother, a constant, loving, luminous presence who would visit, her form sometimes solid, sometimes little more than a comforting chill and a soft blue light in the water. The mother taught her the language of the currents, how to listen to the songs of the deep, and the sacred duty of protecting their small, warm world. When a very old Lysandra finally closed her eyes for the last time, her body did not decay. At Thalassa's gentle command, the water of the grotto encased her in a shimmering, crystalline cocoon, preserving her in an eternal sleep, a peaceful statue watching over the child she had raised. Thalassa was not alone. She was the daughter of the abyss, the last child of air, and the first true citizen of the new, submerged world. She took up Lysandra's work, tending the glowing gardens, and in time, she began to sing the old Atlantean lullabies to the fish that swam in her pool. The drowned mother would listen, the melodies a sweet, haunting counterpoint to the silence of the deep. Centuries turned into millennia. The world above changed. Empires rose and fell on the shores. The name Atlantis faded from memory into legend, and the legend faded into myth. Sailors on the surface would sometimes speak of a strange, glowing patch in the water on moonless nights, and whisper of a beautiful, sorrowful goddess who ruled a lost city below. On the ocean floor, the myth was reality. The drowned mother, her form now more idea than substance, was woven into the very fabric of the deep. She was the intuition that guided a lost whale, the pressure that warned a submersible from venturing too far, the sudden calm that stilled a raging underwater storm. She was a force of nature, but one with a memory, and in the heart of her domain, the grotto remained. Thalassa's descendants, a small, peaceful tribe of water breathers who had adapted to their unique environment over generations, lived there. They were her children, a living bridge between a dead world and an eternal one. They knew the mother watched over them. From her throne of living coral in the great plaza, Thalassa felt it all. The slow pulse of the tectonic plates, the dance of a billion microscopic lives, the warm, vibrant hum from the grotto. The ghost of the woman was at peace. The duty of the goddess was complete. She had not saved Atlantis, but from its hubris and its fall, she had forged something lasting. A kingdom not of power, but of preservation. A world of silence, punctuated by the enduring, gentle rhythm of a single, loving heart. The city of air was a forgotten dream. The kingdom of the drowned was eternal. And she, Thalassa, the drowned mother, was its soul, forever.